This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. We are back with Kathryn Harrigan. Kathy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ronnie. I enjoyed being back.
So you're a professor at Columbia University. You are the first Henry R. Kravis Professor of Business Leadership. Now, for our listener, who is Henry Kravis?
Well, Henry Kravis is one of the founders of a very important private equity company called KKR, Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts.
They are a big deal.
They are a big deal.
Yeah.
And they oftentimes will take a company private. And that in business, especially a place like Columbia Business School, is a very important consideration because they provide the financing to help companies go to the next level in a way that their previous owners might not have been able to afford or justify while under the scrutiny of being publicly traded.
Right. So just to give a quick overview, you are a corporate strategist, you're a turnaround expert and guru, you're a professor with a PhD from Harvard University. Your background, you served on several corporate boards. You served on nearly a dozen or so advisory boards. On top of that, you have publications. How many publications do you have? I stopped counting. There are hundreds.
I don't count either. All I care is, did I do anything new this year?
Right. And that's true, and that's a good point from the business community, because you can have a CEO that's been phenomenal the past 20 years, and it doesn't matter per se. It's all about right now, is it making that company successful and profitable. But no, your background is just amazing. You are the guru of gurus from a business perspective. Very well versed, very well studied, very well written. So I say that just so that people understand the context for our conversation and for your expertise.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. You know that anything that I've done is probably in print and available on the internet. It
is. There's so much that's available on the internet. So the last time we spoke about some of the media deals, and you have a background in agriculture growing up in Minnesota. We spoke a little about Cargill and Monsanto that are big businesses in that arena. Speaking of new technology today, YouTube, as you know, is the largest distributor of video content in the globe, from our understanding. So people might think of maybe videos that are produced on Disney or Paramount, but YouTube is a massive player, which is owned by Google, a massive player in the distribution of video content. Where do you see their business in your portfolio and research on businesses? What do you see with YouTube and Google, and what they're doing is just amazing?
Well, YouTube is very exciting because that really carries over from the original .com revolution.
Right.
The fact that it has become highly egalitarian. People can create their own content. We have, your Instagram kind of chatter. Everybody is in social media. So the things that people choose to put on YouTube reflect their unique interest groups. And the fact that they can make money on creating content on YouTube is exciting, just like people can have a career reselling things on eBay.
Very true. So there's Mr. Beast. I don't know if you're familiar with him and his name. He has over 350 million followers or so on YouTube, which is astounding. I think he generates through his business, and he's only on YouTube. By the way, he's only in his late 20s. I think he produces nearly $1 billion in revenue, $700 to $1 billion in revenue each year. And he has new material that's coming out on Amazon now. He has his own version of like Survivor on Amazon. Absolutely incredible how he's built his media business that started out as a YouTube channel.
Isn't it fantastic?
It is. It is. And, you don't have the capital costs back in the old days. He didn't need to buy a lot of expensive cameras and equipment to start his media empire now.
Right.
Amazing.
Well, at one time, I tried to do cat videos on YouTube. It didn't amount to anything. I'm still teaching, but there was my interest.
Now, I can tell you, my producer says animal videos are still extremely popular on social media. They're a big deal. So what were your cat videos like?
Oh, I had Maine Coon cats. They're, as you know, they're enormous. And the things that these big animals would do, it made me laugh. So I took some of the funniest things they did and that I had recorded and I posted them, with background music.
Nice.
Like the typical animal video that you'd find.
That's fantastic. Business books. Do you have I've had so many business books through the years. Do you have any favorites that you recommend to business leaders?
Well, again, it depends on your reason for reading a business book. My books are good if you want a very specialized approach to a question.
Tell us about some of your books then. And what topics did you cover and what they are? That's incredible.
The first book, and the one that probably continues forever, has to do with what you do if you are in a declining demand situation.
Right.
And how to make money on that. The second book is about vertical integration and how you manage the revenue stream. And the third book is about joint ventures and strategic alliances, right? And so the next one will be In Search of Synergy, which has to do with businesses within the same corporate family working together.
Now, so for some of the listeners that might be in business and might be higher up, they're looking to grow their business. Speak about your premise in the declining demand, and how do they identify that it's an issue, that their business is declining, and how do you resolve that issue? But I'd love to hear some of your concepts on that.
Well, first thing is let's be pragmatic.
Yes.
If it's declining in demand, that means that fewer customers are buying it. Doesn't mean it's dead, because there are still laggards. Laggards pay good money not to be jostled into doing something they don't want to do prematurely.
Right.
So they're usually your loyalists, which even though there may be technological change around you, particularly if they're in an industrial setting, they're willing to be your partner and continue to buy from you for a reasonable amount of time. So managing a mature, if not declining demand businesses is rather like managing an annuity.
Right. Is there a business that you profiled that was able to deal with that very well in your book or maybe in your syllabus curriculum?
Probably the example that people cite the most is vacuum tubes.
Okay.
Vacuum tubes were, of course, dislodged by solid state, and yet you need vacuum tubes to produce high-fidelity sound. In the early days of color television, you needed vacuum tubes to be able to get the 256 colors that you still don't get when you're on a screen in the internet, I might mention. So that is an example where you could make a phenomenal return from something that people think is deader than a doornail.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I watched a profile on Polaroid.
Yes.
Back and seeing their evolution and the instant Polaroid that came out from a technology standpoint was intriguing.
Instant photography goes in and out of fashion. Young people love instant photography. But here I'll let you in on a secret.
Yes.
Okay. Polaroid does not make the photographic negative. It's made by a chemical company.
Correct. Yes.
Therefore, the companies that are making a lot of money whenever instant photography becomes popular again are companies like Fuji or others who have never abandoned that particular chemical process.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing. Do you remember the days when there was a debate between, I think it was VHS and Beta tapes, right? And which one would prevail? And I think Beta was supposed to be the better technology, but they didn't prevail.
No, because of distribution.
Right.
And Netflix is a real good example of that.
Yes.
Netflix made HBO, the traditional linear way of having premier content, obsolete because of its ready availability.
Right.
So distribution matters a lot more than the basic technological product.
Right. Now, and when and why did you focus on vertical integration as your other book?
Oh, well, that was the most logical thing that you would do, because any company, as it grows from a startup and it scales up and it becomes ready to diversify, the first question it asks is, should I make some of the things I'm currently purchasing, or should I reach down closer to my ultimate customers and go into competition with my distributors?
Right.
So that's a logical business question as you're thinking about how companies would grow.
I had this debate within an industry I work within the construction industry, and we were evaluating buying one of our suppliers and manufacturers. And the question became for us as we debated it was, if we purchase that supplier, then we would have to become 100% of their business in order to integrate them, because our competitors weren't going to buy from their competitor.
Not.
And there were a lot of people that were for it, and I was not, because I just didn't think we had the volume. Now, it turned out that it made sense not to purchase them. But it was far too risky, just from a revenue perspective. So you're right, though. But vertical integration could work. I spoke to a good friend of mine who owns a hospitality company. And what he indicated was that the margins were so small on the hotel side of the business that he had to diversify and vertically integrate some of the partners. So the technology used for the door key passes was a company that they acquired, and then the audiovisual company they acquired, and some of the others, because that was the only way to boost their margins across the entire business. Right. And so in some markets it could work, and some it just doesn't make sense.
Well, that's because, Ronnie, the profitability potential of one industry is different than that of another. Right. So it shrinks in some of them, while innovation, and they all feel safe, let's invent something new and better that consumers are willing to pay for, and there's where the margins are good. Right. So you like to diversify, and being vertically integrated with something you're familiar with makes a lot of sense. Right. As an early move for a company, it's probably a good idea.
Well, and then it probably goes to your next book, because what vertical integration does, if you do it right, depending on the type of product, is that when you integrate it into the business, you can create greater synergy, which was your book, right? Yeah.
Well, there was another book in between there, and that was the one about joint ventures and strategic alliances. Sure. And what I found as I was looking at the diversification and the value chain was lots of times the ways that companies were learning about different businesses that they might want to get into was by partnering up with other companies who already knew their ass from their elbow, if you'll excuse the expression. And so it became very, very popular in the mid-1980s for companies to ally themselves with leaders. They got a kind of an upward wave, a little extra on their investment valuation, and they also learned a lot.
Right. So now you mentioned at one point a great story about Peter Drucker. So for anyone that doesn't know who Peter Drucker is, he's the MBO guru. He was a really big guru from a business understanding perspective. And when he came up with the concept of MBOs, or management by objectives, it was very impactful. Tell me about your work and Peter Drucker's work and how you ended up on the same stage with him.
I'm sure I was on the same stage for a speaking engagement, just to offer some contrast.
Right.
Peter Drucker is so knowledgeable on so many dimensions that they wanted somebody who wouldn't be afraid to take him on some topic or other. And I am blunt and controversial when I have to be. So that was my job, was to draw him out.
So how did that go? By that time he was an established figure, and yet he's sitting on the stage with Kathy having a debate. Right.
Well, like anybody else, it comes as a shock, I suppose, the first time they have to encounter me. My own father was actually upset when he found out that I earned more than he ever earned.
Right.
But that's progress for you.
Now, how did you prepare to have a debate with a Peter Drucker?
I didn't have to do anything special. Okay. I stuck to what I knew. He stuck to what he knew. We looked for the overlap between them. Okay.
Now, one of the items that we also discussed was this notion that a lot of CEOs are coming from the legal profession today. Why do you think that is?
Podcasts are so popular, even monkeys are doing it.
75% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly. That's 210 million people in the United States alone. And yes, podcasts are profitable. Joe Rogan is making $30 million per year. Your content, your knowledge is worth sharing. Don't just dream it, do it. Visit andycostafilms.com/podcast and turn your content into leaks.
That is because it's so complex to manage in so many settings.
Right.
Regulatory, whether it is clearly a regulated industry or whether it's just regulation of competition. Every time that you are a big, successful company and you want to take a move into a new line of business, you want to add something to your portfolio, you are likely to be challenged.
Right.
Therefore, you need to understand a lot about the different aspects of business and how value is actually created. There are some things which big firms are better at creating value for than little firms.
Sure.
And that's where lawyers are so useful in being able to find a reasonable solution to problems like that in competition, in growth, in divestiture, for that matter.
Right. I think so for companies that show enormous promise as they grow and scale, it seems to me like the regulation piece is something that is often misunderstood and miscalculated when it comes to their growth, because as they expand, the requirements are just enormous. If they become public, it's even more enormous. What advice would you give companies having to sift through that next step in their evolution in dealing with regulation? Because you have to be a really big expert in so many different compliance and regulatory areas in order to make your business successful.
Ronnie,
It can be overwhelming.
When you first start to think about being a public company, publicly traded, you have to understand the rules now for it protecting investors and understand the kind of paperwork and the oversight that you're going to be required to report on. I've done my time on various committees, particularly government affairs, regulatory affair committees, because that's one of the things I know about. It is staggering. Even to report your financials, you have to have an internal validity as well as an external validity. Two different accounting companies have to vet you on those two dimensions.
Wow.
It's complex.
It is. No, so I presume that you've had a case study or some study about Enron, especially given your connection to the oil industry.
I knew those guys.
Did you? Okay.
I knew those guys, yeah.
Wow.
Now, of course, in my turnarounds class, I always point out that having off-balance sheet entities is a no-no.
Right.
I also explain about the demise of Arthur Andersen, the accounting company.
Right.
Because those people went to jail.
Right.
For perceived illegality.
Right.
In pushing too far on, the little loopholes they could find
right.
in the law. Yeah.
Now, do you also speak about the evolution out of that Sarbanes-Oxley?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's necessary. That's the internal validity I was talking about.
Right.
That you really have to, have personnel, professionals in your employ who can do both kinds of accounting to make sure that you comply with all of the different constituencies that are demanding information from you if you are a publicly traded company.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up our second discussion, Kathy, this has been phenomenal. What do you think makes a great CEO? Like what skill sets? We spoke about legal profession, but in general, what do you think makes a good leader? I know we spoke about team sports and how that can help shape people, or if not team sports, then maybe drama and theater. But what is it that helps make a CEO a good CEO other than breaking plates and being willing to break plates?
Remember that there are two kinds of leadership positions. The external CEO, lawyers are great for that, and the internal, which is often called the chief operating officer.
Sure.
And that's the team player. That's the one who relates well to people, finds value in everything that people do for the company's forward trajectory. These are the people who can better relate to operating managers and have empathy for all of the different ways that you can solve a problem, because there is no one solution.
Right.
So you have to be a very creative thinker on your feet to be a great CEO.
Now, how does team sports come into play? Someone with a history of team sports.
Team sports is just absolutely critical, because you work as a team to get an objective. Everybody plays their part. Their part is oftentimes well-defined. That's why I always put theatrical productions into the category. If you happen to be female and you can't play basketball or football, well, maybe you can be engaged in a theatrical production, where you play your part and you make your contributions. Everybody's contributions are equally important in getting the result that's desired. You rely upon people. You rely upon each other. You support each other.
Right.
You have an incredible empathy for each other, as well as a lot of self-identification.
Right.
And that's what teams will do for you.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned the COO role. I think sometimes people think that's the number 2 person, but you define them as being really critical. So from the CEO to the COO, but that person is the one that does what? And well-run businesses, you described it a little, but I want you to expand on that premise slightly more, because I've served in that role, and it is so critical to the evolution. At one of my companies, the COO was the person that really ran the entire business day to day. They was a go-to person, and they were such a people. I remember in one scenario, they hired another senior leader who believed that they needed to report to the CEO, and they refused to report to the COO. But they didn't understand that CEO was the person that ran the company day to day, which was a strategic mistake as they joined the organization. But that role is so pivotal.
Well, okay, not to take thunder away from the CEO, that is an external relationship.
Correct. Yes.
That's the person who goes out and talks to the investors.
Absolutely.
That's the person that has to take the ultimate meeting when you do a transaction. That's the person who is pushing the envelope of the company's scope.
Right.
That's different than running the day-to-day.
Correct.
Going back to the basic strategy course, it's strategy formulation and implementation. You can have great ideas, great formulation. You can't implement it, you're dead.
I agree with you. Yes.
The COO is all about implementation.
Right.
It's about day-to-day operations,
right.
Getting things done.
Exactly. I've been preaching that for so long, and for people that hadn't grown into that level yet, it's an absolutely critical function, that getting the things done and in the organization is just so important. Now, you mentioned to me that there was a movie that was modeled after you.
Baby Boom.
Baby Boom. How did that come about?
A quick summary. Okay. Baby Boom. It's approximately 1983 Diane Keaton movie. You can still get it, I'm sure, by just using Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Right.
I have. The basic plot of the story is that she's an up-and-coming contender wanting to be a leader and CEO in her own right. She works for either a consulting company or an investment bank. I have never decided exactly what it does. And in order for Diane Keaton to be able to get ideas about how such a critter looked, they brought her to my classroom. She watched me teach my class. She had me interact with the senior executives on our advisory board, and she put some of my mannerisms and things into the course, the movie, to make it believable.
Right. I love it.
This was a movie that is recently been profiled in the Wall Street Journal as being one of the early movies that showed you how women were portrayed in business. I get a kick out of that.
Amazing. That's cool. As we wrap up, Kathy, I just had a thought. So what's the typical size of your executive MBA class? So when you walk into
36.
36. So for those that are listening and visualize this, you're on the campus of Columbia University. You're walking into your first day of class with 37 executives, senior executives of major corporations at one of the finest universities in the country. What is your first comment to this group? Like, you're a teacher coming in, they probably think in many respects that they are the biggest thing ever from a business leadership perspective because they've lived it. They're not 22, 23, as I mentioned earlier in the program. What is your first comment as you walk into this class of really significant business leaders, probably with really big egos? And here you come walking into this class. What do you say to them?
Well, after I introduce myself, I just ask them, there's an assigned case. It's very simple. It's about funeral home directors, funerary. And I say, which of these two companies' strategy do you prefer and why?
Okay.
I get them talking.
Okay.
And they'll tell me. The beauty of executive education and MBA program is you get the people who know something talking.
Right.
And you try to guide them in the direction that you want to bring out the ideas.
That's fascinating. So you don't come in right off and telling them everything that you think they need to know.
I tell them my name.
Kathy, this has been incredible. If you had a message to leave with those 36, 37 CEOs and the plenty others that are listening to our program about how to build their next business or the next stage in their career, what would you say to them other than come to your class?
Get into line management and run something.
Very cool.
There's only a few people in this world who can actually run something. Maybe 5% of the population. And let's not waste management talent. These people have an MBA. They need to get in there and run companies and create value so we have jobs and we have customers that are happy.
Absolutely. Kathy, thank you so much. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have someone of your business expertise on our program.
Oh, thank you, Ronnie. You're so kind to me. Thank you.
Let's stay connected.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.